Will blocking the MORE Act hurt the Republicans? Talking about this morning. Canadelic podcast. The MORE Act passed the House. You don't know what the MORE Act is. It's, when there's not enough soup to go around, and you come up and you say, please, could I have some more? And then you act like you're pathetic enough to get some more. Sounds like something we do to the state over here with our marijuana laws. Please, can I have some more freedom? Can I have just a little bit more freedom? Thank you, sir. But no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the MORE Act, Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, which passed the House of Representatives but still needs to pass the Senate and be signed by the president in order to become law. But it faces some major hurdles here. And it looks like the Republicans seem to be successful in blocking this because it doesn't seem like it has the support in the Senate that we wished it had. But the question is, will they pay a price for that? And it's a little bit more interesting than one might assume. It's not as black and white as my for legalization or not for legalization. This resistance doesn't come from that same reefer madness kind of vein that's been going around for quite some time, but it comes from an unwillingness to support something that is introduced by the other party. I think we've come to that type of party line. So last month, the MORE Act passed the House of Representatives. So that's not the first time it's passed, but there was new hope that we were actually going to get this thing through the Senate. And that doesn't seem like it might happen now. So in order for the MORE Act, which we're going to talk about exactly what the MORE Act is in a few minutes, but in order for that to continue on its way towards law, it has to gain 60 votes in a Senate that's evenly divided. That means all the Democrats have to vote for it, and 10 Republicans are going to have to vote for it. It doesn't seem like it has the support to pass. All the Republicans and 10 Democrats could vote for it too. The only reason I'm not mentioning that is because that seems like a very unlikely scenario. So why aren't they supporting this? What's the deal? Why wouldn't you support the MORE Act? Well, there's that expungement part, which I know doesn't sit well with a lot of conservatives. And if you look at some of the legislation that has been introduced as an alternative to the MORE Act, then you can easily see that that is a big part of what the conservatives do not want when it comes to the marijuana legalization. So, are they going to face a backlash? Because we know in this country that marijuana has support from the majority of Americans, whether they be Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarians, Communists, whatever they are. Everybody seems to support legalization of marijuana. It's a plant. And there are so many arguments for not keeping this plant illegal that it's hard to find. It's hard to imagine, the people that are still against this. And we're going to take a little bit of a look at why some of these people are against this and how they are looking to mitigate the damage. So if voters are supporting them, or they might lose support of the voters by voting against legalizing marijuana, there must be some sort of something that they can do to gain those votes back. And it looks like there is. So every 2 years, you get a new crop of members from both parties. But from the Republican Party, who don't have to defend the drug war, they don't have to defend the drug war anymore because they're younger, right? So they're looking at other reasons as to why they wouldn't support something like this. And it gets a little into the muck of politics, which I just can't stand sometimes. But some of the arguments are Don't we have more important things to do? That's my favorite argument about anything, folks. Don't you have something better to do than talk about marijuana? We have war in Ukraine, possible World War III. We have women's rights being challenged. How can you possibly bring up marijuana at a time like this? Well, let me tell you something. There's always fucking something going on. Always something going on. If there isn't, they're going to invent something that's going on to keep you glued to the tube, even though we don't use tubes anymore. We still say that. Anything to keep your attention. There's always going to be a crisis. There's always going to be something happening. That doesn't mean that other things get put on the back burner or the other things are not important. It's a bullshit argument. For me, there are other things going on, but that's not the only argument against the MORE Act, or it's not the only way that Republicans can save face by not supporting it. And it's kind of genius, kind of politics, kind of disgusting. But there is another GOP-led bill that was introduced by Nancy Mace, not Nancy Grace, Nancy Mace, called the States Reform Act, which is more in line with more conservative values. So not doing a lot of social equity, lower taxes, federal taxes on marijuana, and a couple of other differentiations. So what that does is it allows someone, that's in Congress to not support the MORE Act, which has this majority support, at least it passed the House already, and to say, well, I don't support that, but I do support marijuana legalization. Look, I voted for this. The States Reform Act does not have nearly the chance of passing as the MORE Act. So one could look at it like just a political tool to say, hey, I did vote for marijuana. Look, it's the States Reform Act. I just didn't vote for the Democrats' marijuana. To be honest, that is a strong position to have, especially in this political climate. So it's important, I think, that we shine a light on this and show that this bill has an opportunity to pass, and this is why it's being thwarted, and the kind of political tactics that are being used to not allow this bill to pass. Now, that doesn't mean that the MORE Act is this perfect piece of legislation. Being in the marijuana community, I talk to a lot of people, and I look at the reaction from a lot of people on social media, online. And there are a lot of people in the marijuana community that do not support the MORE Act. The irony here is that the reason that most of the, pure marijuana activists, I would say untainted marijuana activists, are against the MORE Act is because it solidifies, it would give an enormous leg up to the big corporate conglomerates, the multi-state operators. It would give them an enormous leg up on the entire marijuana industry, and it could feasibly close out small business from being part of it. Even though the MORE Act has built into it social equity, that's been, a subject of debate. Social equity, giving more opportunity, more funds, more licenses to communities that were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs sounds amazing as a soundbite, but the implementation of that is extremely difficult. You can award a license. Let's take Florida, for instance. You can give a license for free. Let's waive the application fee. Let's waive that. What is it now? $200,000, something like that, $120,000. Let's waive that. Let's get that out of here. Let's just award the license. You don't even have to go through the application process. We're just going to give you the license. Well, here's the requirements for you to set up your shop. Now you have to go out and secure several $1 million, anywhere from $2 to $20 million, easy, if you're going to start this business, because you've been awarded a license. That license has value to other people that have lots of money. So there is a temptation, not just a temptation, there is a structure implemented there, whereas it could well benefit you more financially to just sell your license to somebody that's going to give you a lot of money for it right now. And you don't have to go out and try and find money. And when I say find money, when you're starting a marijuana business right now, there's no going to the Small Business Association for loans. As a matter of fact, we're hearing some stories right now about people who work in the marijuana industry, just as, bud tenders or work at a dispensary or in management, they're having trouble getting home mortgages because they work in an unstable job. That's kind of an issue. So even if you have this license, implementing that license, starting this marijuana business, it's almost like starting a business that you don't need a license for. Hey, we're ready to go. But do you have the startup capital? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the connections? That's a big issue. So there are some people, I would call them real purists, that are really against the MORE Act on the liberal side, on the Democratic side. It's a complicated issue. I was a very big supporter of Amendment 2 here in Florida, and I think looking back, I still would be. But one of the biggest arguments that we had was, well, this law is not perfect. There was, I don't know if you know this, but not every marijuana activist in the state of Florida supported Amendment 2, which is our current medical marijuana law. The arguments against it were similar to the arguments against the MORE Act, which is this is not going to allow for, this is too overregulated. The cards, the system, everything is overregulated. It's too much. We need something better. We need home grow, right? That was a big argument against it. There were people that voted no on 2 that went out and petitioned for it. I know them personally. And then after Amendment 2 passed, we got hit with, well, 3 big things. No smoking cannabis. That's not allowed. That wasn't in Amendment 2. That was in the regulations that came after 8A, right? That was a Senate Bill 8A. So all these regulations came after the law was passed. So all these people in Florida voted for cannabis legalization, or at least medical cannabis legalization, thinking they're going to get smokable flower. Oh, and the other thing they banned, edibles. The only other form of cannabis consumption people are familiar with. So we didn't realize that was going to happen when we passed Amendment 2. We knew there would be some political shenanigans, but no flower, no edibles. That was out now trying to kill the market. So the other thing that was not clear in the original Amendment 2 is the vertical versus horizontal structure. It looked like the intention was to make all the marijuana businesses vertically integrated, but it wasn't necessarily worded that way. So there have been a lot of lawsuits challenging Amendment 2 since then, saying that people have the ability to just have a cultivation center or just have a retail store, not have to own the whole thing, the whole shebang. So the reason I bring up Amendment 2 is because you can't have, there are no perfect laws, but you have to make sure that you don't pass laws that are going to be very difficult to walk back or to amend. Now, we did pass a law that said, that basically said there's no smoking, and we did have to go back and repeal that, and we had to get that out of there. The horizontal integration thing is not something that we were able to do because the people that own licenses are very politically connected. Nobody wants to give up the value of those licenses, and the politicians don't want to lose the support and those donations, because those donations bring in a lot of votes. So you have kind of an issue when it comes to how, the marijuana industry has been broken down. So that's how you look at it on, from the Florida standpoint. If we expand this to the federal government, you have a bigger playing field. You have state lines, you have different state laws that are going to be impacted by this. It's it's going to be, whenever legalization passes, however it passes, it's going to be a big, for lack of a better term, it's going to be a shit show out there. There's going to be a lot of not knowing what's legal and what's not, right? So just kind of like New York right now, there's a lot of stuff going on there that's not legal, but not necessarily criminal enough to arrest you over, right? So you do have to have a license to sell cannabis in New York, but there's a lot of people selling it that don't have a license, and they're not really being prosecuted, not as of yet anyway. Once I think things get in order, then we'll see more. We actually just saw a guy in Detroit had a marijuana vending machine, illegal marijuana vending machine, built into his house, the side of his house, for 4 years. I mean, and he's bringing in $2,000 a day, right? Was it $2,000 a day or $2,000 a week? I think it was $2,000 a day he was bringing in on this thing. I mean, even if those are his grosses, making $1,000 a day, just sitting there, reloading his cannabis vending machine. That's a nice one too. It's like a touch screen. But for 4 years, no one said anything. No one did anything until somebody got mad about it and started reporting him. And then he got busted. Could you imagine the audacity of having a marijuana vending machine on the side of your house? Unbelievable. So what does the MORE Act actually do? What does the MORE Act actually do? Who could possibly be against this, right? You want to know? So the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act replaces, first of all, we talked about this, it replaces statutory references to marijuana, both spelled with a J, and marijuana with an H, with cannabis. So let's start calling it what it is. It requires the Bureau of Labor and Statistics to regularly publish demographic data on cannabis business owners and employees so we can actually track the industry as opposed to relying on independent reports and things like that. It establishes a trust fund to support various programs and services for individuals and businesses in communities impacted by the war on drugs. These are, I'd say, predominantly minority communities, right? And this is one of the big pushbacks, something you won't see in the States Reform Act, right? Not pushing money into minority communities. It imposes an excise tax on cannabis products produced or imported into the United States and an occupational tax on cannabis production facilities and export warehouses. Some taxes, something that could make people vote against it. Makes the SBA, Small Business Administration, loans and services available to entities that are cannabis-related legitimate businesses or providers. So the MORE Act would actually allow people to go to the SBA and apply for loans. This is a really big deal because when you're teaching people, we started FCC, we were trying to teach people not only about cannabis, but how to start a business. And if you look into the startup world, how to start a business, because, securing SBA loans is a major step. And this is, at the point we have to say, hey, you used to be able to, you ordinarily would be able to go get an SBA loan. But since you're in the cannabis industry, here's Kickstarter. You're gonna have to crowdfund or find another avenue. What else does it do? It prohibits the denial of federal public benefits to a person on the basis of certain cannabis-related conduct or convictions. So you might still be able to get your federal benefits, whether that be Social Security, I guess Social Security, I guess Medicaid, Medicare, things like that. They can't deny you of those services because you have a cannabis conviction. It also prohibits the denial of benefits and protections under immigration laws on the basis of a cannabis related event. So your cannabis conviction or conduct would not affect your immigration status. It establishes a process to expunge convictions and conduct sentencing review hearings related to federal cannabis offenses, and directs the Government Accountability Office to study the societal impacts of cannabis legalization. That second to last one establishes a process to expunge convictions and conduct sentencing review hearings related to federal cannabis offenses. That's an interesting one, because on the face of it, it looks amazing. Wow, we're actually gonna expunge these convictions and review these cases. The issue with this is that most of the cannabis convictions are not on the federal level. You know, most people that are in jail for cannabis were not arrested by the DEA, or not sitting in federal prison. It's more states. They have committed state offenses and have been incarcerated by the state. And this MORE Act does not address the state. It addresses federal cannabis offenses. You've seen states pass laws, and you've seen states introduce bills that would do the same thing on the state level, expunge convictions, and unfortunately, we do have to rely on the states to do that, to actually uh, implement those things. And I go back and forth on the expungement and release from prison thing. Should you be in trouble for marijuana? No. Did you benefit from it being illegal? Probably. So that's like the rub, right? It's almost like student loan forgiveness. Well, you benefited from going to school, and these people paid back. So it's like, where do you go? Which way do you go? And I can see where you might argue against something like that, but at the same time, somebody had to be serving that need. We had to be getting weed from somewhere. And to keep people in jail for something that others are making millions and millions of dollars a day selling, who probably commit, those white collar crimes, those crimes that nobody really cares about. These were ill-gotten gains as well. So I'm still a little torn. Let's just say that I'm still a little torn. If I was, like I've said this before, if I was, in jail, I might feel differently. But I know that I benefited, hypothetically, from cannabis being illegal, because everybody would come to my house and buy cannabis, as opposed to going to any kind of dispensary or legal avenue to go and get it. And I took a risk, and I benefited from that risk. So I don't really know how I feel about it. But at the same time, where would it come from if not from somebody smuggling it here? Where would it come from? So it's kind of a philosophical thing with me. So I wonder, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's the gist of it here. It does not look like the MORE Act is going to pass. You might be happy about that. You might not be happy about that. I'm not 100% sure yet how I feel about it. I'm a little disillusioned with a lot of the corruption that I'm seeing, and it looks like it's on both sides of the aisle here. So I'm interested to see how this goes. I'm interested to see more of the discussions. I want to see this brought to the floor. I want to see people discussing this. I want to hear people's pushback against it. I want this to be a topic of discussion. I don't want it to get swept under the rug, because there are more important things to do than the MORE Act. That is just a big fucking slap in the face to millions and millions of Americans who say that this is important to them. I would imagine so. So, just want to give a Little shout out to everybody over there. John, High Class Carrie, Chuck, Ti. Did they really have? They don't promote smoking at NASCAR anymore. Ti says they used to have a Winston Cup. Yeah, I remember. They segregate smokers to a small section. Disney. People don't understand the power Disney has. Don't a significant portion of the population get their income from being YouTube influencers? Can they get a mortgage? I don't know. It depends on how you can. I'm not sure if you can document all of that. If you have a business that's bringing in a lot of money and you're a YouTube influencer, there's no reason why they wouldn't. Well, they shouldn't approve you. But I think Cass's point here is that that's fleeting. You can be an influencer one day and not an influencer the next day, and how does that guarantee your mortgage? But to say that the marijuana industry is some sort of a high risk industry, like it's not going to be around tomorrow, your job's not secure, is just ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's one of the it's the fastest growing industry in the country. I mean, there's I mean, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's like there's more people in marijuana than there are plumbers and electricians put together. Like it's crazy. So I'm just hearing a little bit about this. This isn't something that that we've researched. We've just been contacted, and people are saying that this is happening. So there's a lot of research needs to be put into it. I'm not saying that this is actually happening. I'm saying that we have to look into it a little bit more to see if it's happening. But if it is, it's pretty egregious. It's pretty egregious, and something needs to be done to not allow for the kind of discrimination, because that's what it is. It's discrimination. I did not sell brickweed out of my ice cream truck on Staten Island. Well, it might have been brickweed, but I wouldn't know because I didn't get them in bricks at that point. I didn't start getting them in bricks until college, when I would get those 10-pound bricks and steam them apart. I think the first 10-pound brick I tried to cut with a hacksaw, because I don't know if you guys know, but these things are solid. They're a brick. They're not, you can't break them apart. There's no, I was hitting it with the hacksaw, and then I was like, maybe we can steam it apart. And that worked. And I don't know how I came up with that, or how someone told me about it or something. There was no YouTube or Google or anything like that. So I don't know how we figured that out, but we're like, yeah, let's just steam it apart. And that's how we did that. Hypothetically, anyway. Is there a statute of limitations on this shit? That was a long fucking time ago, I'll tell you that. All right. Well, anyway, I think that's about it for today. Hope you guys have a great Thursday. Oh, is it Thursday or Wednesday? It's Wednesday. No, it's Thursday. Yeah, I know. I get confused. It's Cinco de Mayo. You guys gonna have some tacos today? Don't wear a sombrero. I have a sombrero over there. I should go put it on for Cinco de Mayo. Hold on. I'll be right back. There we go. All right. This is Pete saying, Happy Cinco de Mayo, cabrones. Have a good day.